Guadalcanal, late 1942. A Marine shuffles forward in the chow line, mess kit in hand, and at the head of the line stands a corpsman holding not food, but a small yellow tablet. The Marine's skin already has a faint golden tint, like a fading bruise, like old parchment. He knows what the pill is. He also knows what every man in his squad swears it does. It turns you yellow, and worse, it does things to you below the belt that no man wants to discuss. He believes it. He takes the tablet anyway because the sergeant is watching his throat. In the Pacific War, the United States military fought two enemies. Only one of them was Japanese, and against the other one, the main weapon was a bitter yellow pill that half the force was trying to spit out. Today's file is the story of Atabrine, the drug the troops hated, the rumor that nearly beat it, and the strange yellow tint that became an unofficial uniform of the Pacific War. We're going inside the disease that put more Americans in hospital beds than Japanese bullets did the day Japan captured almost the entire world's supply of the cure, the German invention America bet the Pacific on, and the enforcement machine. Watched throats, tongue checks, and a sign made of human skulls that it took to make young men swallow. This isn't a story about medicine. It's a story about what it takes to make an army protect itself from an enemy it can't see. Before we get into it, if you're new to these files, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, tap the like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It helps the channel more than you know. Start with the arithmetic that terrified planners in 1942 because it wasn't the arithmetic of battle. It was the arithmetic of blood, human blood, and the mosquito that drinks it. The Solomon Islands and New Guinea sit in some of the most malarial terrain on Earth, and when American forces landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, they landed an unprotected bloodstream into the middle of it. The Anopheles mosquito did the rest. Within months, malaria wasn't a medical footnote to the campaign. It was the campaign. For long stretches of the fight for Guadalcanal, malaria put more Marines and soldiers in the hospital than Japanese fire did. Not by a little, but by multiples. Men burned through fevers of 104, shook with chills in 100-degree jungle, recovered enough to stand a watch, and relapsed a week later. By the time the 1st Marine Division came off the island at the end of 1942, it was riddled with the disease, a victorious division that malaria had rendered for the moment combat ineffective. The Japanese hadn't destroyed it. The mosquito had gutted it. And understand what the disease actually did to a man, because hospitalized with malaria sounds gentle, and malaria is not gentle. The classic attack runs in a cycle, and veterans could set clocks by it. First, the cold stage, a chill from the inside of the bones, teeth chattering, a grown man shaking hard enough to rattle a canvas cot while lying under blankets in 100-degree jungle heat. Then the pivot, the fever stage, temperature climbing past 104, the body a furnace, the mind sliding sideways into a fog where some men talk to people who weren't there. Then the drenching sweats, the sheets wringing wet, and a hollow, trembling exhaustion. Then, with the malaria strains common in the South Pacific, the whole performance came back, again and again on its own schedule, each round leaving the man weaker, anemic, and further from being any use to his rifle squad. Multiply that by tens of thousands of cots, and you understand why generals feared the mosquito's arithmetic more than the emperor's. Douglas MacArthur, watching the same catastrophe unfold in New Guinea, put the math in one brutal sentence to Colonel Paul Russell, the Army's malaria expert. "This will be a long war," he said, "if for every division I have facing the enemy, I must count on a 2nd division in hospital with malaria, and a 3rd division convalescing from it. 1 division fighting, 2 divisions shaking with fever." That was the real order of battle in the South Pacific, and every planner knew it. Here's what made 1942 a genuine emergency rather than a hard problem. The cure was already gone. For 3 centuries, the answer to malaria had been quinine, refined from the bark of the cinchona tree. And by the 20th century, the world's cinchona grew overwhelmingly in one place, the Dutch East Indies, on the island of Java, home to the vast majority of global production. In early 1942, Japan took Java. In one campaign, the enemy hadn't just captured territory. He had captured the world's medicine cabinet, roughly 90% of the supply of the only proven malaria drug on Earth, leaving America to fight the most malarial war in its history with whatever stockpiles it had shipped out before the fall. The mosquito had an ally now, the supply chain. What America reached for instead is one of the war's quieter ironies. Atabrine, the Army's name for the synthetic compound quinacrine, was not an American triumph of the lab. It had been developed a decade earlier by chemists in Germany, in the same pharmaceutical world that produced the era's great dye and drug cartels, and marketed as Atabrine. A German invention, mass-produced in America, to save American soldiers fighting Germany's ally. The chemist's fingerprints matter for another reason, and it's the reason for the title of this file. Structurally, quinacrine is built on acridine, a family of compounds famous as dyes. Atabrine wasn't just a yellow pill. At the molecular level, it behaved like what it was, a stain. Take it every day, as ordered, and the compound accumulated in your tissues and did exactly what a dye does. Your skin took on a yellow cast. In heavy, prolonged use, even the whites of a man's eyes could go faintly gold. Medically, it was harmless, and it faded after the war. Visually, it was unmissable. Whole units in the Pacific turned the color of the pill they were living on. The men joked they'd been dipped. They weren't entirely wrong. The yellow was bad enough. The taste was worse. Atabrine was memorably, punishingly bitter, a bitterness that soaked into the tongue and sat there, that coffee couldn't chase and canned peaches couldn't bury. And in the early months the dosing hadn't been worked out, so it came with nausea, cramps, and vomiting as regular passengers. In a small number of men it produced genuinely frightening reactions. Fixing that became a national crash program. With quinine gone, American researchers threw themselves at the chemistry of this inherited German drug, mapping how it moved through the body, hunting the schedule that would protect a soldier without wrecking his stomach. A research effort that famously extended to volunteers, including inmate volunteers at stateside institutions who let themselves be infected with malaria so the Army could learn to beat it. Out of all that came the settled wartime routine, a loading period to build the drug up in the body's tissues, then the small daily maintenance tablet that could be handed out in a chow line. The science got the pill down to one bitter moment a day. It could do nothing about what the troops believed that moment was doing to them, and that was the real fight. What nearly sank the program was a sentence. Somewhere in the latrine rumor network of the Pacific, and Japanese propaganda broadcasts are commonly credited with pouring fuel on it, a claim took hold. Atabrine makes you sterile. It turns you yellow, and it takes your manhood. No part of that second claim was true. It didn't matter. You could not have engineered a rumor better designed to defeat 19-year-old men. A soldier will accept remarkable risks to his life. His future children are another department entirely. Men palmed the tablets. Men tongued them and spat them in the mud 10 steps past the mess line. Men traded them, buried them, fed them to the jungle. Every spat-out pill was invisible at the moment it happened. And 2 weeks later, it was a stretcher case, another rifle out of the line, another bed filled in a hospital system already drowning. So the military did something armies are very good at. It stopped asking. Atabrine discipline became a command responsibility, enforced with the same seriousness as weapons maintenance, because that's what it was. The dose settled down to a small tablet a day, roughly 1/10 of a gram, and the delivery system became the Atabrine line. The entire unit files passed. An NCO or corpsman drops the tablet on each tongue, and the man swallows it there, under supervision, sometimes with a mouth check to follow. Open up, tongue up, next. Officers were held answerable for their unit's malaria rates, which meant sergeants took pill call as personally as rifle inspection, and the units that were serious about it advertised. Outside an American hospital in Papua New Guinea, medical troops built the most famous piece of health propaganda of the Pacific War, a billboard decorated with actual human skulls over a caption that did not attempt subtlety. These men didn't take their Atabrine. Thousands of soldiers marched past that sign. The argument was hard to answer, and the yellow skin, the side effect everyone hated, quietly switched sides. Think about the enforcement problem from a commander's point of view. Compliance with most medicine is invisible. Not this one. The drug that stained its takers had built its own inspection system. A rifleman the color of weak tea was a rifleman taking his tablet. A man in the same platoon with clear, healthy-looking skin was, paradoxically, the problem child. Veterans of the theater remembered the logic out loud. By 1944, in the malaria belts, yellow was what soldiering looked like. The tint was practically a compliance badge, worn whether you liked it or not. Now stand in the line yourself for a minute, because this is where the whole apparatus either worked or didn't. It's New Guinea, 1943, dusk, which is the dangerous hour, because dusk belongs to the Anopheles. You've already obeyed the first commandments of malaria discipline. Sleeves rolled down and buttoned at the wrist in smothering heat, trousers bloused, repellent smeared on the back of your neck, your cot's mosquito net checked for tears like a parachute. Now you're in the evening line. Ahead of you, the corpsman works his way down the file. Tablet, tongue, swallow, next. And you watch the man in front of you, a replacement 2 weeks off the boat, hold the pill in his cheek and turn away. The sergeant doesn't raise his voice. He just says the man's name once and waits. The pill goes down. The sergeant has buried no one to bullets this month. He has watched malaria carry off more men than the Japanese have managed all year, and he has stopped finding the sterility rumor funny. Tablet, tongue, swallow. Next, that boring ritual, repeated 1,000,000 times across 1,000 miles of jungle, is what an army defeating a parasite actually looks like. Did it work? The honest answer has a catch in it, and the catch matters. Where the discipline held, it worked, dramatically. And the pill never fought alone. While the Atabrine line guarded the bloodstream, the Army went after the enemy's airfields, the water the mosquitoes bred in. Malaria control units drained swamps around bases, ditched and filled the standing puddles, poured oil on what they couldn't drain so the larvae suffocated at the surface, and screened the mess halls and sleeping quarters. Then, from 1944, came the hammer. DDT, the miracle insecticide of the age, fogged across whole islands from spray aircraft, painted onto tent walls, dusted into foxholes, killing on contact and going on killing for weeks. Atabrine, sleeves, nets, drainage, and DDT together turned American bases from mosquito feeding grounds into hostile territory for the insect itself, and malaria rates in American units fell from catastrophe toward nuisance. The malaria graph of the Pacific War bends exactly where that whole machine, chemical, mechanical, and disciplinary, gets serious. But Atabrine had a secret the men eventually figured out. It was a suppressant, not a cure. Keep taking it, and the disease stayed down. Stop. Say the week you shipped home, and the malaria that had been waiting in your body could climb right back out of the basement. Picture it, the summer after the war, a young veteran back in his boyhood bedroom in Ohio, and one July afternoon, the cold starts crawling up from inside his bones. His mother piles on quilts and calls it a summer flu, and he lies there shaking under 3 blankets in 90-degree heat, sweating through the mattress, and he knows exactly what it is because he watched it 100 times on cots in New Guinea. The Pacific had followed him home in his own bloodstream. Thousands of families watched some version of that scene in the years after 1945, in farmhouses and city apartments a world away from any jungle, and veterans' hospitals treated relapses for years. The pill hadn't lied exactly. It had just never promised what everyone assumed, and if you want to know what the Pacific looked like without an Atabrine line, you only have to look across the wire. Japanese forces in New Guinea, at the end of a starved and broken supply chain, faced the same mosquitoes with dwindling medicine, no DDT, and no margin. and disease tore through them at a scale that beggars the American numbers. In the grimmest campaigns, Japanese soldiers died of malaria, dysentery, and starvation in numbers that rivaled or dwarfed their combat losses. The mosquito was neutral. Logistics weren't. The bitter yellow pill, swallowed, resented, enforced, was one of the sharpest asymmetries of the entire theater, and it never fired a shot. So, it turns you yellow. True. Every word of the rumor's first half was true, and the yellow men won the Pacific because of it. The pill that stained them was a German invention, rushed into American production because the real cure was locked up on a Japanese-held island. It tasted like punishment, arrived wrapped in the best-engineered rumor of the war, and had to be forced down the throats of the very men it was saving, one supervised swallow at a time. Look at your family's Pacific photographs again. The thin young men squinting in the island sun. Some of that color the camera couldn't quite capture wasn't tan. It was the war's strangest badge of discipline, worn in the skin itself. If your father or grandfather served in the Pacific, did he ever talk about the Atabrine line, the taste, the rumor? Did anyone in the family notice the yellow tint when he came home, or the malaria relapses that followed some men for years? Put it in the comments. Those details are exactly what these files are built from, and the best story in these comments becomes a future file. If this one was worth your time, leave a like. It pushes the story in front of more people. And share it with someone who thinks the Pacific War was decided only by rifles and carriers, because this history is too strange and too human to stay buried. And subscribe to the Foot Locker Files for more of what they didn't put in the textbooks. To the men who rolled their sleeves down at dusk, swallowed the bitter yellow tablet under a sergeant's eye, and stood their watch shaking with fever anyway. This one was for you.